The late afternoon Miami sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Ocean View Academy as Min-jun Kang adjusted his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. At 38, he commanded respect with just his presence. Broad shoulders, sharp jawline, and eyes that held secrets darker than the night. The small Korean tattoo on his neck, barely visible above his collar, was the only hint of the world he truly belonged to. He was late. Again. Business had kept him longer than expected, the kind that required his personal attention and left no room for delays. But this was different. This was about Ye-jin. His 8-year-old daughter sat quietly in the hallway outside her classroom, her small hands folded in her lap, dark eyes reflecting the same guarded expression he wore like armor. She'd been acting differently lately, more withdrawn, more like him. That thought twisted something uncomfortable in his chest. "Mr. Kang?" A warm voice drew his attention. He turned, expecting to see the elderly Mrs. Patterson who'd been Ye-jin's teacher since September. Instead, he found himself looking into the most captivating brown eyes he'd ever seen, belonging to a woman whose presence seemed to fill the entire hallway with light. Everything changed in that moment. Min-jun had built his life on control. Every decision calculated, every emotion carefully contained, every relationship serving a purpose. It had been 5 years since he'd allowed himself to feel anything beyond the fierce protectiveness he held for Ye-jin, and he intended to keep it that way. But as he stood in the doorway of classroom 3B at Ocean View Academy, watching this woman, this stranger, kneel down to his daughter's eye level with infinite patience, something shifted inside his carefully constructed walls. "You must be Mr. Kang," she said, rising gracefully to her full height. She was beautiful in a way that seemed effortless, rich brown skin that glowed under the fluorescent lights, natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and a smile that reached her eyes. "I'm Miss Coleman, Layla Coleman. I've been Ye-jin's teacher since Mrs. Patterson retired last month." "Ms. Coleman." He inclined his head slightly, his voice carrying the formal tone he used in all his business dealings. "I apologize for the delay. My schedule ran longer than anticipated." "No need to apologize. I understand how demanding work can be." Her voice held no judgment, only understanding. "Would you like to sit down? I think it's important we talk about Ye-jin." Something in her tone made him pause. In his world, when someone said they needed to talk, it usually meant trouble. But there was something different about Layla Coleman, a warmth that seemed genuine, not calculated. They settled into the small plastic chairs designed for children, and Min-jun felt absurdly large and out of place. Layla seemed perfectly comfortable, as if she belonged exactly where she was. "Ye-jin is incredibly bright," she began, pulling out a folder filled with his daughter's work. "Her writing shows remarkable creativity, and her understanding of complex concepts is well beyond her grade level." Min-jun felt a familiar surge of pride. "She's always been advanced." "She has, but I'm concerned about something else." Layla's fingers traced the edge of one of Ye-jin's drawings, a house with no windows, and a single door that seemed too small. "She's building walls, Mr. Kang. Emotional ones. She sits alone at lunch, doesn't participate in group activities, and when the other children try to include her, she pulls back." The words hit him harder than he expected. "She's always been reserved." "Reserved is one thing. This is different." Layla leaned forward slightly, her brown eyes intense but kind. "Children learn behavior, Mr. Kang. They mirror what they see at home. The question is, where did she learn to protect herself like this?" The directness of her question should have offended him. In his world, no one questioned Min-jun Kang. No one dared to suggest that his parenting might be lacking, but instead of anger, he felt something else entirely: recognition. "My wife died when Ye-jin was 3, he heard himself saying, the words coming out before he could stop them. "Since then, it's been just the two of us." Layla's expression softened immediately. "I'm so sorry for your loss. That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you." "We managed." The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I'm sure you did. But managing and healing are two different things." She pulled out another drawing, this one showing a little girl standing next to a tall figure, both of them surrounded by what looked like a fortress. Ye Jin draws a lot of protective barriers. Walls, fences, castles with moats. She's trying to keep the world out. Minjun stared at the drawing, seeing his own reflection in every carefully drawn line. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to let some light in. Layla's voice was gentle but firm. For both of you. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between them. Outside, he could hear the distant sounds of children playing, their laughter echoing through the hallways of Ocean View Academy. When was the last time he'd heard Ye Jin laugh like that? What would you recommend? He asked finally. Well, there's a father-daughter art class starting next week at the Bayfront Community Center. It might be a good opportunity for you two to do something creative together. Something that doesn't involve... She gestured vaguely, and he realized she was trying to be tactful about his obvious wealth and the barriers it created. I'm not particularly artistic. Neither am I, but that's not really the point. Her smile was encouraging. It's about connection, about showing Ye Jin that it's safe to express herself, to be vulnerable, to let people in. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here was this woman, this teacher who barely knew him, suggesting he learn to be vulnerable. If she only knew the truth about his life, about the empire he'd built on secrets and carefully maintained distance. You seem to care a great deal about your students, Hon, he observed. I do. Every child deserves to feel safe enough to be themselves. Something flickered across her face, a shadow of personal experience that made him curious despite himself. And what about their teachers? Do they feel safe enough to be themselves? The question surprised them both. Layla blinked, clearly not expecting such a personal inquiry from a parent she'd just met. That's an interesting question, Mr. Kang. Min Jun, he corrected, not sure why. And it wasn't meant to be intrusive. You just seem like someone who gives a lot of herself to others. I was wondering who takes care of you. The vulnerability in his voice caught them both off guard. For a moment, the careful, professional distance between them wavered, and he saw something real in her eyes, loneliness that matched his own. I take care of myself, she said softly. I have to. Before he could ask what she meant, the classroom door opened and Ye Jin appeared, her small backpack slung over one shoulder. Daddy, are we going home now? Yes, sweetheart. He stood, his imposing height making the classroom seem even smaller. Ms. Coleman was just telling me about an art class you might enjoy. Ye Jin looked between them, her dark eyes curious. With you, if you'd like that. For the first time since he'd arrived, his daughter smiled, really smiled. I'd like that very much. As they prepared to leave, Layla handed him a flyer for the art class, along with her business card. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, and Minjun felt an electric current run up his arm. Thank you, Miss Coleman, for caring about her. It's my job, she replied, but her voice suggested it was much more than that. Layla, she added quietly, so only he could hear. My name is Layla. Walking to his car with Ye Jin's small hand in his, Minjun found himself thinking about brown eyes and warm smiles, about walls that needed to come down and light that needed to come in. For the first time in 5 years, he was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with business. Behind them, Layla Coleman stood in her classroom doorway, watching the sleek black sedan pull away from Ocean View Academy. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to calm the unexpected flutter of her heartbeat. She'd met plenty of parents in her 3 years of teaching, but none had ever looked at her the way Minjun Kang had, as if he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time in a long while. It was dangerous territory for a woman who'd learned to keep her own walls carefully in place. The Bayfront Community Center buzzed with nervous energy as parents and children filtered into the art studio. Minjun felt distinctly out of place among the casual clothes and easy laughter, his business attire making him stand out like a dark suit in a room full of paint-splattered aprons. Daddy, look! Ye Jin tugged on his sleeve, pointing to the colorful supplies arranged on each table. There's so much paint. He'd never seen her this excited about anything. The realization hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time he'd given her something to be genuinely excited about? Mr. Kang? Ye Jin? He turned to find Layla approaching, and his breath caught. Gone was the professional teacher attire, replaced by a flowing sundress in deep purple that complemented her skin beautifully, Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she looked younger, more relaxed. "Miss Coleman, I didn't expect to see you here. Layla, remember?" She smiled, kneeling down to Yejin's level. "And I volunteer here on weekends. I hope you don't mind. I thought it might help Yejin feel more comfortable having a familiar face around." "Can Ms. Layla sit with us?" Yejin asked, her voice hopeful. Before Minjun could respond, the instructor called for everyone's attention. They found seats at a table near the window, the Miami sunshine streaming in and casting everything in golden light. "Today we're going to paint our happy places," announced the instructor, a cheerful woman named Rosa. "Think about where you feel most safe, most loved, most yourself." Minjun stared at the blank canvas in front of him. When was the last time he'd felt truly safe? Truly himself. The questions felt foreign, uncomfortable. Beside him, Yejin had already started, her small brush creating careful strokes of blue and green. He glanced over at Layla, who was helping a young boy at the next table mix colors. "What are you painting, sweetheart?" he asked his daughter. "The beach," Yejin said without looking up. "But not the one we go to. A different one. One where we can build sandcastles and no one has to watch for bad people." The innocence of her words cut through him like a blade. She was 8 years old and already understood that their world required constant vigilance. What kind of childhood was he giving her? "That sounds like a wonderful beach," Layla said softly, having returned to their table. She'd overheard, and her eyes held understanding rather than judgment. "What about you, Daddy? What's your happy place?" Minjun looked down at his still blank canvas. In his world, showing weakness was dangerous. Admitting to happiness was admitting to something that could be taken away. But here, in this sun-filled room with his daughter's expectant eyes on him, the rules felt different. "I'm not sure I have one," he admitted quietly. "Everyone has one," Layla said, settling into the chair beside him. "Sometimes we just forget where to look." She dipped her brush in warm yellow paint and made a small mark on his canvas, just a tiny sun in the corner. "Start small. What makes you feel peaceful?" He thought about it, really thought about it. "Yejin's laughter," he said finally. "When she laughs, really laughs, everything else disappears. Then paint that." "How do you paint laughter?" Layla smiled, and he felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "However it looks to you." For the next hour, Minjun found himself lost in something he'd never experienced, the simple act of creating without purpose, without strategy, without an end goal beyond the moment itself. His painting evolved into something abstract but somehow meaningful, swirls of gold and pink that reminded him of sunset, with small figures that might have been a father and daughter. "It's beautiful," Layla said, and he realized she'd been watching him work. "It's messy." "The best things usually are." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the rest of the room faded away. There was something building between them, something neither of them had planned but both could feel. "Ms. Layla, look at mine." Yejin's voice broke the spell, and they both turned to admire her beach scene. It was surprisingly sophisticated for an 8-year-old, with careful attention to detail and a sense of joy that radiated from every brushstroke. "It's magnificent, Yejin. You're a natural artist." "Daddy helped with the clouds," she said proudly. Minjun looked at the clouds in question, fluffy white shapes he'd added when Yejin asked for help. He'd been so focused on her happiness that he hadn't even realized he was enjoying himself. "We make a good team," he said, ruffling his daughter's hair. As the class wound down, parents and children began cleaning up their stations. Minjun found himself reluctant to leave, reluctant to return to the world where everything had sharp edges and hidden dangers. "There's a cafe next door," Layla said casually as they washed their brushes. "They have amazing ice cream if you're not in a hurry." "Can we, Daddy? Please?" Yejin's eyes were bright with hope. He should say no. He had calls to make, business to attend to, but looking at his daughter's paint-stained fingers and genuine smile, he found himself nodding. The cafe was small and cozy, with mismatched furniture and local artwork covering the walls. They found a table by the window, and Yejin immediately became absorbed in coloring the children's menu they'd given her. "She's different here," Layla observed, watching Yejin hum quietly to herself as she colored. "Different how?" "Lighter, like she doesn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders." Minjun felt exposed by her insight. She's had to grow up fast. That doesn't mean she can't still be a child. Layla stirred her coffee thoughtfully. What happened to her mother, if you don't mind me asking? The question he'd been dreading. In his world, the truth was a luxury he couldn't afford, but something about Layla made him want to try. Car accident, he said simply. It wasn't entirely a lie. The truth was just more complicated. She was coming home from work late one night. Wrong place, wrong time. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. It was. Unexpected. The understatement of the century. Everything changed after that. Change isn't always bad, Layla said gently. Sometimes it's the only way to find something better. You sound like you speak from experience. A shadow crossed her face. I moved to Miami 6 months ago. Sometimes starting over is the only option. Running from something? Running to something, she corrected. There's a difference. Before he could ask what she meant, Ye-jin looked up from her coloring. Ms. Layla, do you have any kids? No, sweetheart, just my students. Do you want kids? Ye-jin, Min-jun warned gently, but Layla laughed. It's okay. Yes, I'd like children someday when the time is right. You'd be a good mom, Ye-jin said matter-of-factly. You're nice and you smell like flowers, and you don't get mad when kids ask too many questions. Layla's eyes grew soft. Thank you, Ye-jin. That might be the nicest compliment I've ever received. As they walked back to their cars, the Miami evening air warm around them, Min-jun felt something he hadn't experienced in years, contentment. Not the satisfaction of a successful business deal or the relief of a problem solved, but simple, uncomplicated happiness. Same time next week? Layla asked as they reached her car. We'll be here, he promised, and meant it. Driving home with Ye-jin chattering excitedly about their paintings in the back seat, Min-jun caught himself smiling in the rearview mirror. For one afternoon, he'd forgotten about territories and rivals and the constant chess game his life had become. He'd just been a father, and maybe, just maybe, something more. 3 weeks into their Saturday art classes, Min-jun found himself looking forward to weekends in a way he hadn't since before his wife died. Ye-jin had blossomed under the creative attention, her reserved nature slowly giving way to genuine enthusiasm. But if he was being honest with himself, his daughter wasn't the only reason he eagerly anticipated their time at the Bayfront Community Center. Layla Coleman had become a bright spot in his carefully controlled world. Daddy, can we invite Miss Layla to dinner? Ye-jin asked one Saturday afternoon as they packed up their art supplies. They'd just finished painting family portraits, and Ye-jin had insisted on including Layla in theirs, standing beside them with a warm smile. Min-jun glanced over at Layla, who was helping another child clean paint from her hands. I don't know if Miss Layla would be interested in— I'd love to, Layla said, appearing beside their table with perfect timing. If you're sure it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all, he heard himself saying, even as his mind raced through the implications. No one came to his house, ever. The Coral Gables estate was his sanctuary, his fortress, the one place where he could let his guard down completely. But looking at Ye-jin's delighted expression and Layla's genuine smile, he found himself making an exception. 2 hours later, they stood in his kitchen, a space of marble countertops and professional-grade appliances that rarely saw use beyond reheating takeout. Layla moved around the space with easy confidence, somehow making the sterile environment feel warm and lived in. You don't cook much, do you? She observed, noting the pristine condition of everything. I'm better at ordering in, he admitted. Seok-ho usually handles meals when he's here. Seok-ho, Maide's assistant. The word felt inadequate, but it was safer than explaining that Seok-ho was his second-in-command, the man who'd taken a bullet for him 3 years ago, and never questioned a single order. Well, lucky for you, I love to cook. Layla tied her hair back with a band from her wrist, and Min-jun found himself mesmerized by the graceful movement of her hands. Ye-jin, want to help me make your daddy's first home-cooked meal in probably years? Can we make Korean food? Ye-jin asked hopefully. Daddy always orders it, but I've never made it. I don't know many Korean recipes, Layla admitted, but I make a mean fusion dish. How about Korean-style fried rice with some southern touches? As they cooked together, Min-jun found himself relegated to chopping vegetables, a task that felt surprisingly meditative. He watched Layla teach Ye-jin how to crack eggs properly, how to test if the oil was hot enough, how to fold ingredients together with care and patience. "My grandmother taught me to cook," Layla said, guiding Yejin's small hands as they stirred the rice. "She used to say that food made with love tastes different, that you can actually taste the care someone puts into it." "Where is she now?" Yejin asked. A shadow crossed Layla's face. "She passed away last year. That's part of why I moved to Miami. Too many memories in Atlanta." Minjun looked up from his vegetables, hearing the pain she was trying to hide. "I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. She raised me after my parents died when I was 12. Car accident." She met his eyes briefly, and he saw the shared understanding there. They both knew what it was like to have their worlds shattered by sudden loss. "Is that why you became a teacher?" he asked. "Because of her?" "Partly. She was a teacher too. Used to say that every child needs at least one adult who believes in them completely." Layla smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I guess I wanted to be that person for other kids." "You are," Yejin said seriously. "You believe in me." "I absolutely do, sweetheart." As they sat down to eat, Minjun realized this was the first time in years that his dining room had been used for its intended purpose. Usually he ate alone in his office or grabbed something quick between meetings. But here, with Layla and Yejin chattering about art techniques and weekend plans, the space felt alive. "This is delicious," he said, and meant it. The fusion of flavors was unexpected but perfect, familiar Korean tastes with southern warmth. "Daddy, can we do this every week?" Yejin asked. "Cook together, I mean?" "I'd like that," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. After dinner, Yejin insisted on showing Layla her room, leaving Minjun to clean up. He found himself moving slowly, reluctant for the evening to end. When they returned, Yejin was yawning despite her best efforts to stay awake. "Someone's ready for bed," Layla observed gently. "I'm not tired," Yejin protested, even as she rubbed her eyes. "How about I read you a story?" Minjun offered. It had been their routine when she was younger, but somewhere along the way, bedtime had become rushed, perfunctory. "Can Ms. Layla listen too?" Minjun looked at Layla questioningly, and she nodded. "I'd love to hear a story." They settled in Yejin's room, the little girl curled between them as Minjun read from a book about a brave princess who saved her kingdom through kindness rather than force. His voice grew softer as Yejin's breathing evened out, and by the final page, she was fast asleep. "She's beautiful," Layla whispered as they carefully extracted themselves from the bed. "She's everything good about me and her mother," Minjun said quietly. "Sometimes I worry I'm not enough for her." "You're more than enough. She adores you." They moved to the living room where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Biscayne Bay. The lights of downtown Miami twinkled in the distance, and the moon cast silver paths across the water. "Beautiful view," Layla said, settling onto the couch. "I bought this place for the view," Minjun admitted, pouring them each a glass of wine. "After Soo-jin died, I needed somewhere that felt peaceful." "Soo-jin was your wife?" He nodded, settling beside her but maintaining careful distance. "She would have loved this evening. Loved you." "Tell me about her." It was a request that would have been impossible to fulfill just months ago, but sitting here with Layla, surrounded by the warmth she'd brought into his home, Minjun found himself sharing memories he'd kept locked away. She was an artist, painted these incredible landscapes that somehow captured emotions, not just places. She used to say that art was the language of the soul. He smiled at the memory. She would have had Yejin painting masterpieces by now. "She sounds wonderful." She was, and she would have wanted Yejin to have what she had tonight, a home filled with laughter and warmth and, he paused, looking at Layla, and someone who cares about her the way you do. "I do care about her. Very much." "And what about her father?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "Do you care about him too?" Layla set down her wine glass, her brown eyes serious. "That's a dangerous question, Minjun." "Why?" "Because you might not like the answer. Try me." She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the moonlight. "Yes," she said finally. "I care about him too. More than I probably should." The admission hung between them, heavy with possibility and risk, Minjun felt something shift in his chest, a wall crumbling that he'd spent 5 years building. "Layla," he began, but she held up a hand. "I should go. It's getting late and I have papers to grade tomorrow." He wanted to ask her to stay, wanted to explore this fragile thing growing between them. But he also understood the wisdom in her caution. Whatever this was, it deserved to be handled carefully. "Let me drive you home." "I have my car, remember?" "Then let me follow you. Make sure you get there safely." She smiled at that. "Very protective, aren't you?" "When it comes to people I care about, absolutely." As they stood in his doorway saying goodbye, Layla reached up and touched his cheek gently. "Thank you for tonight, for letting me in." "Thank you for wanting to come in." After her taillights disappeared into the Miami night, Minjun stood in his empty house, still feeling the warmth of her touch on his skin. For the first time in 5 years, his fortress felt less like protection and more like a prison. Change was coming, whether he was ready or not. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting Minjun from the first peaceful sleep he'd had in weeks. Seok-ho's voice was tense, controlled, never a good sign. "We have a problem. Eleanor Whitfield called an emergency school board meeting. She's trying to get Layla fired." Minjun was instantly awake, his mind sharp despite the early hour. "On what grounds?" "Inappropriate conduct with a parent. She's claiming Layla crossed professional boundaries by developing a personal relationship with you and Ye Jin." The words hit him like a physical blow. In his world, he was used to being the target of attacks, schemes, and power plays. But Layla was innocent, a teacher who'd done nothing wrong except care about his daughter, and somehow about him. "How did Whitfield find out about our friendship?" "Someone saw you at her apartment building last week, when you drove her home after her car broke down." Minjun closed his eyes, remembering that evening. Layla's ancient Honda had finally given up in the school parking lot, and he'd offered her a ride. They'd talked for an hour in his car outside her building, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. It had been innocent, beautiful even. Now it was being weaponized against her. "There's more," Seok-ho continued. "Whitfield's been digging into Layla's background. She knows about Atlanta." "What about Atlanta?" "The real reason she left. It wasn't just grief over her grandmother. She was fired from her previous school for reporting financial irregularities. Apparently, she discovered that the principal was embezzling funds meant for underprivileged students." Minjun felt a surge of admiration mixed with concern. Of course, Layla would risk her career to protect children. It was exactly the kind of principled stand that made her who she was, and exactly the kind of thing that could destroy her in the wrong hands. Whitfield's using it to paint her as a troublemaker, someone who can't be trusted to maintain appropriate boundaries. "When's the meeting?" "Thursday night, emergency session closed to the public." Minjun was already reaching for his clothes. "Set up a meeting with Diana Wong, and find out everything you can about Eleanor Whitfield's finances. If she's going after Layla, she must have a reason beyond protecting the school's reputation." "Already on it. Diana's expecting your call, and I've got our best people looking into Whitfield's connections." After hanging up, Minjun stood in his bedroom, staring out at the pre-dawn darkness over Biscayne Bay. In his world, problems were solved with money, influence, or carefully applied pressure. But this was different. This was about Layla's reputation, her career, her life. One wrong move, and he could make everything worse. The next morning, he found himself doing something he'd never done before, waiting outside Ocean View Academy like any other parent. When Layla emerged from the building, her usual bright smile was replaced by exhaustion and worry. "Minjun, what are you doing here?" "I heard about the meeting, about Whitfield's accusations." Her face crumpled slightly before she caught herself. "I should have known this would happen. I should have been more careful." "You did nothing wrong, didn't I?" She looked around the parking lot, noting the curious stares from other teachers. "I got involved with a parent. I crossed lines I swore I'd never cross." "What lines? Caring about a student? Having dinner with a family? Being a friend?" "You know it's more than that." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What's happening between us? It's not just friendship, and we both know it." The truth hung between them, undeniable and dangerous. Minjun wanted to reach for her, to offer comfort and reassurance, but he knew any public display would only make things worse. "Let me help," he said instead. "How? This isn't a problem you can solve with money or connections. Minjun, this is about my professional reputation, my integrity. If I lose this job—" She took a shaky breath. "I can't afford to start over again. I have bills, responsibilities. My Aunt Dolores is sick, and I'm all she has." The mention of her aunt, the woman who'd raised her after her grandmother died, added another layer to Minjun's growing concern. He'd met Dolores once when she'd visited Layla, a proud woman battling diabetes and refusing to accept help she couldn't repay. "There has to be something." "There is." Layla's voice grew stronger, more determined. "I can resign." Quietly, before the meeting. Whitfield gets what she wants and the scandal dies down. "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. "You're not running away from this." "I'm not running away, I'm being practical. I'm protecting what matters most." "And what about Ye Jin? She needs you." "She needs you. A father who's present, who's engaged, who's learned to let people in. You don't need me for that anymore." But he did need her. The realization hit him with startling clarity, not just for Ye Jin, but for himself. Layla had brought light into their carefully controlled world, had shown him what life could be like when it was lived, instead of merely managed. "What if I told you I was falling in love with you?" The words escaped before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them like a confession and a plea. Layla's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Minjun, what if I told you that for the first time in 5 years, I look forward to tomorrow because you might be in it? What if I said that watching you with Ye Jin makes me believe in the possibility of happiness again? I'd say you're making this harder than it already is." "Good. It should be hard. Things worth fighting for usually are." Before she could respond, the sound of car doors slamming drew their attention. Eleanor Whitfield was approaching with 2 other school board members, her expression coldly triumphant. "Ms. Coleman," Whitfield said, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "How convenient. We were just discussing your situation." "Mrs. Whitfield." Layla straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "If you'd like to schedule a meeting—" "Oh, I think we're past the point of scheduled meetings, don't you? Especially given your history of inappropriate relationships with authority figures." Minjun felt something dangerous stir in his chest. The careful control he maintained in all his business dealings began to fray at the edges. "I think you should be very careful about your next words," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warning that made all 3 board members take an involuntary step back. "Mr. Kang, isn't it?" Whitfield's smile was sharp as a blade. "How interesting that you're here. Almost as if you're involved somehow." "I'm a parent concerned about my daughter's education. Ms. Coleman is an exceptional teacher who's made a significant positive impact on Ye Jin's development. I'm sure she has. The question is what other impacts she's made." The insinuation was clear, and Minjun felt his carefully maintained facade beginning to crack. In his world, people who threatened what he cared about learned very quickly to reconsider their positions. "You know what, Mrs. Whitfield?" Layla stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "You're right. I did cross a line. I cared too much about a student and her family. I invested myself in their well-being beyond what my contract requires. If that's grounds for dismissal, then I guess I'm guilty as charged." "Layla, don't—" Minjun started, but she held up a hand. "I'll submit my resignation this afternoon. Effective immediately." As she walked away, her head held high despite the tears threatening to fall, Minjun felt something shift inside him. The lonely man who'd vowed never to love again was gone, replaced by someone who would do anything to protect the woman who'd changed his world. Eleanor Whitfield had just made a very dangerous enemy, and she had no idea what was coming. Minjun had built his empire on the principle that information was power, and power properly applied could solve any problem. By Thursday morning, he knew everything there was to know about Eleanor Whitfield's finances, her connections, and most importantly, her vulnerabilities. Diana Wong spread the documents across his office desk like a general planning a campaign. "She's been embezzling from the school's scholarship fund for 3 years, small amounts carefully hidden, but the pattern is clear." "How much?" "Nearly $200,000. She's been using a shell company to inflate maintenance contracts, then pocketing the difference. Minjun studied the financial records, his mind already calculating the best approach. In his world, this would be simple: confront Whitfield with the evidence, demand Layla's reinstatement, and ensure the woman never worked in education again. But Layla's words echoed in his mind. This isn't a problem you can solve with money or connections. She was wrong about the money and connections, but she was right about something deeper. This wasn't just about winning. It was about doing it the right way, the way she would approve of. There's something else, Diana continued. The reason Whitfield targeted Layla specifically, she knows about Layla's history in Atlanta, about how she exposed the corruption there. Whitfield was afraid Layla might discover her own scheme. So she tried to eliminate the threat. Exactly. But she made one crucial mistake. She went after someone you care about. The emergency school board meeting was held in the conference room at Ocean View Academy, a sterile space that felt more like a courtroom than an educational facility. Minjun arrived early, taking a seat in the back where he could observe without drawing attention. Layla entered with quiet dignity, her resignation letter clutched in her hand. She dressed professionally, a navy blue suit that emphasized her natural grace, but Minjun could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands. Eleanor Whitfield called the meeting to order with obvious satisfaction. We're here to address the inappropriate conduct of Ms. Layla Coleman, who has violated the professional boundaries expected of our faculty. What specific violations are you alleging? Asked Dr. Martinez, the board's vice president. Ms. Coleman has engaged in a personal relationship with the parent of one of her students, compromising her professional judgment and creating a conflict of interest. That's a serious accusation, said another board member. Do you have evidence? Whitfield produced a folder of photographs. Minjun and Layla at the community center, sitting in his car outside her apartment, walking together after the art class. Innocent moments twisted into something sordid by implication and innuendo. Furthermore, Whitfield continued, Ms. Coleman has a history of insubordination and boundary violations. She was terminated from her previous position in Atlanta for making unfounded accusations against her superiors. Minjun watched Layla's face as her past was weaponized against her. She sat perfectly still, her dignity intact despite the character assassination taking place. Ms. Coleman, Dr. Martinez said gently, would you like to respond to these allegations? Layla stood slowly, her resignation letter still in her hand. For a moment, Minjun thought she was going to surrender without a fight. Then she lifted her chin, and he saw the fire that had first attracted him to her. Yes, I would. She set the resignation letter aside. Mrs. Whitfield is correct about one thing. I did develop a personal relationship with Mr. Kang and his daughter. I care about them deeply, and I'm not ashamed of that. Whitfield's smile grew predatory. So you admit... I admit to being a teacher who believes that education is about more than just curriculum. It's about seeing the whole child, understanding their needs, and sometimes that means connecting with their families in meaningful ways. Layla's voice grew stronger as she continued. Yes, I reported financial irregularities in Atlanta. Because children were being denied resources they desperately needed, while administrators lined their own pockets. I'd do it again, without hesitation. Ms. Coleman, Dr. Martinez interrupted. While your dedication is admirable, there are professional boundaries. Boundaries that protect whom? Layla's eyes flashed. The children, or the adults who profit from keeping those children at arm's length. Minjun felt a surge of pride watching her fight. This was the woman who'd changed his life, who'd shown him that strength could be gentle and courage could be quiet. It was time to show her that he'd learned those lessons. He stood, and every head in the room turned toward him. If I may, I'd like to address the board. Mr. Kang, Whitfield said sharply. This is a closed session. I'm a parent with a child in this school system. I have a right to speak about the quality of education my daughter receives. Dr. Martinez nodded. Please, go ahead. Minjun moved to the front of the room, his presence commanding attention. Ms. Coleman didn't just teach my daughter, she saved her. When Ye-Jin came to Ocean View Academy, she was withdrawn, isolated, afraid to trust anyone. Ms. Coleman saw past the walls my daughter had built and gave her permission to be a child again. He looked directly at Layla as he continued. She did the same thing for me. She showed me that being a father means more than just providing and protecting. It means being present, being vulnerable, being willing to let love in even when it's terrifying. Mr. Kang, Whitfield interrupted, while your gratitude is touching, I'm not finished. His voice carried the quiet authority that had built his empire. You want to talk about inappropriate conduct? Let's talk about the $200,000 you've stolen from the scholarship fund over the past 3 years. The room went dead silent. Whitfield's face drained of color. Minjun placed a folder on the table in front of Dr. Martinez. Financial records, bank statements, invoices for services never rendered. All the evidence you need to see that the person questioning Ms. Coleman's integrity is the one who's been robbing children of their futures. That's impossible, Whitfield stammered. You can't prove... Actually, I can. Diana Wong entered the room, her briefcase in hand. I'm Diana Wong, attorney for Mr. Kang. I've spent the last 48 hours documenting Mrs. Whitfield's embezzlement scheme. The evidence is overwhelming. As Diana presented the financial evidence, Minjun watched Whitfield's world crumble. But his attention kept returning to Layla, who was staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. Mrs. Whitfield, Dr. Martinez said after reviewing the documents, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. This is ridiculous. You can't... Actually, we can, said another board member, and we will. As Whitfield was led away, Dr. Martinez turned to Layla. Ms. Coleman, on behalf of the board, I apologize for this ordeal. Your position is secure and we'd like to discuss expanding your role here at Ocean View Academy. After the meeting, Minjun found Layla in the parking lot, leaning against her car and staring up at the stars. You didn't have to do that, she said without looking at him. Yes, I did. I could have fought my own battles. I know. That's one of the things I love about you. He moved closer, close enough to see the tears on her cheeks. But you don't have to fight them alone anymore. She turned to face him then, her brown eyes reflecting the moonlight. You said you were falling in love with me. I was wrong. He reached up to cup her face gently. I didn't fall. I dove headfirst, completely, irrevocably. I love you. Layla Coleman, I love your strength and your compassion and the way you make everything better just by being in it. I love you too, she whispered. God help me. I love you too. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after years of wandering in the dark. It felt like the beginning of everything he'd never dared to hope for. So what happens now? She asked when they finally broke apart. Now we build something beautiful together. You, me, and Yejin, a family. I'd like that, she said, smiling through her tears. I'd like that very much. As they stood there in the parking lot of Ocean View Academy, Minjun realized that his vow never to love again had been broken completely. And for the first time in 5 years, he was grateful to be wrong. 1 year later, the sound of laughter echoed through the Coral Gables house as Yejin chased their golden retriever puppy through the kitchen, her art smock covered in finger paints from their morning session. Minjun watched from the doorway, marveling at how different his home felt now, alive, warm, filled with the chaos and joy of a real family. Careful, sweetheart. Layla called from the stove, where she was preparing Korean pancakes for their Saturday brunch tradition. Remember what we said about running in the house? Sorry, Mom, Yejin called back, the word coming naturally now after months of gradual acceptance and love. Minjun felt his chest tighten with emotion every time his daughter called Layla Mom. They'd made it official 3 months ago in a small ceremony on the beach, with Yejin as their flower girl and Seok Ho as his best man. Diana Wong had served as Layla's maid of honor, and even Aunt Dolores had been well enough to attend, her diabetes finally under control thanks to the excellent medical care Minjun had quietly arranged. What are you thinking about? Layla asked, appearing beside him with flower on her cheek and love in her eyes. Just this, all of it. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of vanilla and happiness that always surrounded her. A year ago, I was a lonely man who'd vowed never to love again. And then you met your daughter's new teacher, she finished, smiling up at him. The most beautiful, stubborn, principled woman in Miami. He agreed, kissing her softly. who completely destroyed all my carefully constructed walls. Good thing, too. Those walls were keeping out all the best parts of life. From the kitchen came the sound of Ye Jin singing a Korean lullaby Layla had been teaching her, her voice pure and joyful. Their dog barked along enthusiastically, creating a symphony of chaos that somehow sounded like perfection. "I love our life," Minjun said simply. "So do I," Layla replied, her hand finding his. "So do I." Outside, the Miami sun painted everything in gold, and inside, a family that had found each other against all odds continued to build something beautiful, one day at a time. The end.